All right, so what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be discussing the intro to ecology. So a lot of this is just vocab, and so I went ahead and I put this diagram up on y'all's notes page. So I already, colored in all my little pictures, so you can color in whatever it is that you want right here. So you can just do your little drawings, and I'll explain my drawings as we go along. But like I said, this is all going to be covering all of our intro vocab. So you can also find this vocab on your unit checklist, which is on your Schoology page. You'll see that there's a classification, kingdoms, and intro to ecology checklist, and it has all of this vocab on here, including additional vocabulary that you need to know for your test. So let's go ahead and get started. So for ecology, ecology is the study of organisms. Okay, so this could be plants, animals, bacteria, basically anything, and their interactions with their environment. So all of these different organisms, basically we're going to study like what they eat in their environment, where they live, whether or not they have any type of impact on their environment, things like that. And so we're going to look at our levels of organization in an ecological perspective. So for example, the smallest amount of specific things that we can have would be considered a species. So I can see right here, I have these little, fish drawn in. You could say they're like little goldfish, but a species is a group of organisms that are so similar that they interbreed and produce fertile offspring. Okay, so that means that those offspring can also breed. So if you have a species and they can produce offspring, but those offspring cannot breed, then it's not officially a species. So a very good example of this is when you get a donkey and a horse together and they reproduce, they're going to produce a mule. And so the mule is going to be the offspring. But mules are infertile. You cannot take two mules and produce another baby mule. It doesn't work that way. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in genetics for why that doesn't happen. So a species is a group of organisms that are so similar they can interbreed and produce fertile offspring. Those fertile offspring will continue to propagate that population so the population can get bigger. So our next level is actually population, and we can see we have this little orange fish combined with some little pink fish. So our population is all members of a single species that live in one area. Okay, so I drew the pink fish and I drew the little orange fish. So I can see that my little pink fish are a little bit bigger, and we can have that. Sometimes, males are bigger than females or vice versa. Sometimes you have the different colors, things like that. So our population is all the members of a single species that live in an area. So now let's go over here and talk about these two things, because these are important for our species and our population and eventually our community. Okay, so the habitat is going to be the location where these organisms live. Okay, so location, where an organism lives. Okay, so it's their home. Okay, if we want to anthropomorphize that. Okay, it's their home. I think location's misspelled. There we go. All right, so within their habitat, they're also going to have a niche. Okay, so a niche is the role or job a population plays in the community. Okay. So, for example, okay, this little squirrel right here, we know he lives mostly up in the trees. Sometimes they'll come down to the ground and they'll scavenge for nuts. And so, you know, part of their job, inadvertently, they're going to try to store nuts for the winter. And so they'll dig little holes and they'll put the nuts in the little holes, but they often forget where they buried them. And so you do have some nuts that are buried in the ground, and eventually, you know, they'll sprout into trees. So trees try to make the nuts as appealing as possible, and so the squirrels are going to want to pick them up and, you know, go like hoard them somewhere and hopefully, you know, forget about them so that way a new tree can be sprouted. And so that's the role of squirrels. So if we actually got rid of squirrels, because there are some areas that consider, you know, squirrels pests, you know, and if you go to some countries, they actually consider them food products. So if you got rid of squirrels altogether, you're no longer going to have, you know, anything living in the trees. And so you might have birds come in, and birds might overpopulate because now they have the space. And then you're also not going to have those trees be able to spread, you know, their saplings. You know, the nuts are not going to be buried in the ground. And so you're not going to have the tree be able to spread as much. And so squirrels are actually very important for the ecosystem. And if you're looking at an ecosystem, one of the ways you can tell it's healthy is if there's a lot of different animals, such as this squirrel. So the squirrel plays an important part in the community. So a community is all the living populations that exist and interact in an environment. Okay, so if I go back over here, okay, so I can say I have all my fish. Okay, so I have my bigger, you know, colored fish and my little orange fish. I also have a shark. Okay, so my funny little shark that's down here. I also have some plant life. Okay, so these are all different things that are living and they're interacting within their environment. Okay, so that's going to be my community. And each of these guys has a role. They have a job. If you take one of these guys out, something is going to go wrong. If I take the fish out, the shark might eventually die off because there's nothing to eat. If I take the sharks out, the fish are going to overpopulate. If I take the plants out, then there's not going to be as much oxygen in the water and everything's going to die. Okay, so everything has a job, everything has a role. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about the ecosystem. Okay, so for the ecosystem, I went ahead and drew a little beach scene right here. I'm going to push this up. So my ecosystem consists of all organisms that live in an area together with the environment. Okay, so what this means, this is talking about all the biotic and all the abiotic factors. Okay, so all biotic and all abiotic factors. So I'm going to write this in right here if I could find a pen. Okay, so all biotic plus abiotic. Okay, all biotic plus abiotic. All right, so what is biotic and abiotic? So bio, remember, means living. Okay, so biotic are living factors. Okay, so for example, okay, humans, reptiles, bacteria, fungi, etc. Okay, so anything that is living that's you're going to find in the environment. Abiotic are non-living factors. Okay, so for example, okay, rock, temperature, okay, water, let's see here, light. Okay, even viruses are abiotic, okay, because viruses are not living. So I know some of y'all are probably thinking, you know, oh, well, there's stuff that's on the rocks that would be considered living, or stuff that's in the water that would be considered living. That's correct, but it's not the rock and it's not the water. Okay, so it would be something that's separate. All right. So our biomes. Biomes are distinct regions or ecosystems identified by temperature and rainfall. Okay, so how much precipitation they get. Okay, so for example, I have this meadow right here, and so usually when we have a meadow, that means the temperatures are ambient. It's not too hot, it's not too cold. It gets an appropriate amount of rainfall, so that way, you know, everything is green, and then, you know, the plants are going to flower. Over here in the desert, we know it's very hot and they get very little rainfall. Okay, so that's something that characterizes the desert. And then over here with my tree, so this might be a forest. You can imagine whatever type of forest it is. So, you know, they may get a lot of rainfall, but the temperatures may be different. So like, for example, if this is a forest that you might find in like Canada, okay, so it's gonna, you know, have a wide range of temperatures. It's gonna get very cold, but then it can also get, you know, somewhat warm and then also have a lot of rainfall. Okay, so some of our different biomes, if we think about it, we have our rainforest. Okay, we have our desert. We have the tundra, the ocean, freshwater lakes, okay, swamp. We can keep on going on and on. Okay, so there's a lot of different types of biomes. And then all together that creates the biosphere. Okay, so all of our biomes together create the biosphere. And so we could see we have the planet Earth right here. So this is any region on Earth that supports life. Okay, so this is all introductory material. Y'all probably already know all of this, but just be prepared for the test that you do know all of these terms. So I'll go ahead and post my notes up with this video and let me know if you have any questions.